Hi, this is Peach Jack, and our November Garden Discovery Walk is at Seward Park and includes the Audubon Center. Seward Park is known for many things. This is the new gateway. It's called the Japanese Torii Gate. This project replaces the 26-foot timber torii that was constructed at the entrance to Seward Park in 1934. The gardens are seasonal and ever-changing at the entrance. This seasonal garden is ever-changing with color and texture. On this walk, we will be exploring landscapes that were established by people, as well as native landscapes that exist in the forest. We begin here at the entrance to the park.
And then go up on that path to the spine.
Seward Park is also known as a nature preserve as well as a park. The Audubon Center is located right at the entrance. It has an environmental learning center. There are also swimming beaches and picnicking areas. The park is on a peninsula and is surrounded by water. The Environmental Learning Center uses this pristine forest that has never been logged. There are trails through a wonderful forest in the upper hillsides. This park is also famous for the landscape that was planted by the Olmstead brothers, who have planted parks all over the city of Seattle to look naturalistic. The Audubon Center is a destination of its own. Educational classes are being held on a regular basis for adults and children. Today's tour is special because we have the privilege of a guide named Ed Dominguez, who is a naturalist that works for the Audubon Society. He will show us many things about native plants, about habitats, and about the birds that they support through their center. Ed begins our walk on this rainy day talking to us about native plants and what they do to create habitat for animals. An added benefit to participating with the Audubon Center are the resources they have available to us: birding maps, travel journals, and ways in which we can find and recognize birds around the country. The Audubon Society is a conservation leader. Today, our travel journals feature Anna's hummingbird.
Coming back for a drink, you can always tell Anna's hummingbirds, they have kind of a white eye ring. You can see around her eye is a little white, and it kind of points to the back like a teardrop. She's had her drink, and she's... Look at that emerald green back. So there's a male, he's getting his drink, and he's not facing us, but you would see his magenta goes clear over his head and down his nose. In the summer, we have a migratory hummingbird called the rufous. Rufous means red, so it's an orange hummingbird. But they've all headed back down to Southern California by now. But
And that's orange on the neck, or is it?
Orange on the
because they
whole
still have a
body.
green back.
They have a green back, but the flanks and the front and the head are all orange.
The Audubon Center is also famous for teaching about pollinators and creating pathways so that they may thrive with good food. Here in front of the Audubon Center, we have a variety of plants. Looks a little bit weedy, but all of these plants are there for nectar and seeds that provide food for the birds and the bees.
Called fireweed, Epilobium angustifolium, and it is called a pioneer plant. It's a native plant, and it's called a pioneer plant because after fires or disturbed areas, or after Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, this is one of the first plants that colonizes those disturbed areas. And it has a tall scape with beautiful purple flowers that have 5 petals. There's some down here, and then the seeds are tiny little seeds that are in these wind-dispersed little tendrils of cellulose that carry them away on the wind. Hummingbirds love these flowers in the spring, as do our pollinating bumblebees, mason bees, honeybees, and so they're a great nectar source for many, many creatures. The little seeds are in these pods, and then the pods burst open with the little tendrils of fluff that disperse the seeds by the wind.
Wow. So you purposely leave them here as pollinators?
Yes.
Because some people might think, why they haven't weeded the garden?
Well, and the purple flowers are beautiful. They start blooming from the bottom and then work their way up to the top. So they're kind of at the end of their flowering cycle now that we're in mid-September, and they're all seeding, and they're a beautiful plant. They provide a lot of nectar and pollen for pollinators, and they're quite pretty. So fireweed, milkweed here. This is called swamp milkweed, and milkweed is very important for monarch butterflies because it's the most popular plant that monarchs like to lay their eggs on, because their larvae like the milk or the juice inside the milkweed. So the flowers of these, there were little pink flowers in clusters that also our pollinators loved. Wasps, bees, hummingbirds would be at them, but now they've gone to their little pods, and you can see the pods are splitting open, and much like the fireweed, the seeds are wind dispersed. You can see the little white seeds there by these cellulose tendrils that when the wind blows, poof, will blow them away.
Next on our adventure around Seward Park, we will be walking the trails. Heading down towards the lake, we're in search of wildlife. The trails are well marked. Here we have a Seward Park trail map that's right along the lakefront. The lower trail is great for bikes and pedestrians. You can see that cars are not allowed, and this trail goes all the way around the park. It's very popular with joggers, families. Ed teaches us a lot about the trees in the park. On the south side of the park, the Gary oaks that exist there may have been planted by the first peoples that inhabited this land along the shores of Lake Washington. Another important tree is the cottonwood. They live near the water and are also growing along the lake shore. Ed points out to us that beavers will kill trees by sharpening their teeth on the bark. You can see here at the base of this tree they have wrapped it with chicken wire in order to keep the tree alive. It will discourage the beavers from continuing chewing here. We continued down the lakeshore trail in a little bit of rain, searching for more wildlife. We come upon a group of water birds. There are many different kinds of water birds, as well as a variety of kinds of ducks that we see on this day. Ed explains to us about how the ducks feed and how they are different from each other.
Dabbling looks like it's just stick your beak in the mud and hope for the best, but it's much more sophisticated than that. Because if we were to pry open this duck's bill and look inside with a magnification, we'd see the inside of the bill is lined with thousands of corpuscles, specialized cells. Two of those cells in particular, called Herbst corpuscles and Grandry corpuscles, named after the scientists that quote-unquote discovered them, enable the mallards to be selective about what they eat.
Continuing on our walk, we pass one of the picnic shelters on our way to the top of the hill. These shelters may be rented for parties. It is here that we begin our ascent up into the upper trails. The Olmstead Landscape Company is famous for planting trees and shrubs in a naturalistic landscape. It is here that we see the area that's been landscaped by the Olmstead Brothers Landscaping Company. Meadows and trees and shrubs have been spread about in a naturalistic way. We have a wide variety of trees, including madronas that fruit. Ed told us some funny stories about how the berries and nuts will ferment on the trees and bushes, and oftentimes he will find birds that are just drunk and having a great time in the park. One of these plants is called Mahonia, or Oregon grape.
A native plant. We have 3 varieties of this plant. It's called Mahonia aquifolium. Aquifolium meaning shiny leaves as though there's water on them, and there actually is water on them right now. These plants are great for pollinators because they have clusters of yellow flowers in the spring that hummingbirds love, that bumblebees love, mason bees love, wasps, yellow jackets, honeybees all love, and then they mature into the fruit, which is this purple berry that is delicious. I'll eat one now. Oh yeah.
People can eat them.
Absolutely. They make great jams. You can even make liqueur from them. Our indigenous peoples, the Coast Salish, the lake people that lived here, used these for an important fall food source.
Another native plant that wildlife and peoples like to eat are the salal berries.
Also has flowers that are yellow-white in the spring that are pollinators love them, and then they turn into dark berries in the fall, which again, like the Oregon grape and the huckleberry, are edible, tasty, particularly after you get some cold nights and the sugar sweetens them up, and indigenous peoples use them.
The landscape provides us with color and texture as we climb the hillside. Exploring the upper park trails, we continue looking for wildlife. It's not possible to get lost in the woods here. The trails are well marked. Ed was excited to show us the old growth forest and explain to us about the trees and the plants that grow below them, as well as the animals that live in the park. It's quite quiet here and really a natural escape within the city. We find huckleberry, lady ferns, and salmonberry plants, which leaves can be folded to make it look like a butterfly. Continuing on through this deciduous grove, we find animal habitats. Ed knows where the owls live in the park and will take people out on owl walks in private or group tours. What he's showing us here are what's called owl pellets or droppings from the owls that live in the park.
This is a mandible from a bigger creature. This was a rat mandible, so there's the lower front tooth and the grinding molars there. Used to have the rest of his skull here.
We continue on into a sword fern grove. The park is full of ferns. Sword ferns are prehistoric. This park is full of trees that have never been forested or cut for lumber. Douglas firs are native to the Pacific Northwest.
Get some mosses, lichens growing, and then that becomes enough substrate for small plants and trees to take root, and frequently western hemlocks.
Western hemlock.
Seedlings started to grow, and you can see that it spread some of its roots into the Douglas fir and is tapping into the carbon that's stored in this tree and using it for energy, and then it's sinking some of its roots down. For the indigenous peoples, the Coast Salish peoples that inhabited this area, this was their word for this was the tree of life, because they used every part of this tree for their livelihood. The needles of the tree, which have been flattened into scales, they would use this for mattress filling, for pillow filling, for insulation in winter clothing, vests and jackets. They would layer this together. The wood of the tree is clear, strong, rot resistant, and easy to carve, so they would carve their canoes out of this wood. Our indigenous peoples, they believed in use of natural resources, economy of natural resources. So instead of building an individual house for each family, they lived many families in one structure called a longhouse. They used the wood for these, for the beams, for the longhouses. They made smoking pipes out of it. Even the bark, this thin strippy bark, they would peel it off and weave it into baskets, weave it into clothing. The purple brown bark, color in the bark, they would bleach it out in baskets over fires and use it to dye their fish nets, to camouflage them, and they use it for coloring their baskets and clothing. Every part of this tree was important to the coast indigenous Salish peoples. And when the first white European explorers landed on Alki Point in 1851, they saw how important this tree was to the native peoples, and they referred to the native peoples as the people of the cedar. That was their word for it. The western red cedar, a very important tree for our indigenous First Nations.
Now, continuing on our journey, we're heading to the lake trail, which will bring us back to the Audubon Center. Andrews Bay is a sheltered area that's full of waterfowl as well as pleasure boats. Returning back to the Audubon Center, we record the flora and fauna sightings on a bulletin board outside of the little store there. Visitors to the Audubon Center may go into the little gift shop and buy some amazing books and tools used for feeding the birds. They also have Audubon maps and journals available to the public. Birding maps are available showing the various trails around the state of Washington. This includes the Puget Sound Loop, as well as areas in eastern and western Washington.